back to my channel. I just ran my first marathon about 2-3 weeks ago at this point. It's almost been 3 weeks. And this video has been a long time coming. I wanted to record it earlier on in the training season, but the training season did not go how I planned at all. And I decided it would be better to kind of wait until the end and give an all-encompassing review of my marathon journey. So I've been running for over 10 years and it's been off and on. I've had some seasons where I've been better at it. I've had some seasons where I kind of just didn't run for a while or would run every few weeks just to get by. I would say since the beginning of 2022, I really started trying to hone in on my running, especially with this marathon coming up. It was my first ever full marathon. And I wanted to be in the best shape possible for that. So I would say that this past year has been like my best running condition, but I have run half marathons before. I did those pretty well. I PR'd my half marathon time this year in April. So it has definitely been my best year for running, and I wanted to make this video to inspire or motivate anyone who might want to take on the challenge of a marathon or even just a half marathon, and kind of help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made from my training and help you with some learnings along the way in my journey. I'm going to be breaking this video into 2 parts. I'm going to be doing part 1, which is this, and it's going to be the training process of the marathon. So I'll tell you all about how my training went, what my training plan was, things I would do differently, things I'm going to do differently when I'm training for my next marathon this spring. And then part 2 will be the journey of the actual marathon. So I'll tell you what it was like to run the marathon and my thought process during the marathon, but I'll get into all of that in the next video. For this video, I'm gonna tell you my training plan, and then I'll go into the different months within my training plan and where things varied and what I learned from each, I guess, quarter of my training. So my training plan, essentially, I did what I've always done for half marathons, what's worked for me historically, and what got me a PR on my half marathon this year. But I did that on a bigger scale. And like I said, it worked for me for halves, but there are some adjustments I made along the way of this training. But basically how I started out the structure, 4 runs a week. Some people run more, some people even do just 3 days a week. I like to do 4 because it's 1 more run each week than I do in my off season of training. And it's still not a full 5 days, so that allows me a 5th day of another cardio-based exercise. I really like to do the Peloton, so that gives me the freedom to still incorporate the Peloton while I'm doing my trainings. So for those 4 runs, each day is a different kind of run. I started out with 1 long run that increases each week. So 8 miles one week, 9 miles the next week, 11, 13, 15, 17, etc., on and on. So that was my long run each week. My second run would be like a 4-mile, just easy kind of maintenance recovery run. But I wasn't calling it a recovery run at the time. That is something we'll get into later. My third run was a 3-mile speed training, speed interval training. So how I do that is on the treadmill, I will run at a speed that is higher than something I can maintain for long periods of time. So I was doing like a 9.2, which is a 6:22 pace, for about 3 minutes, and then I would rest and walk for 45 seconds and then do that again for 3 minutes, all the way up to the 3-mile mark. And then my last run was a median run, which I started off as like 6 miles because that's like a middle ground. I did that for half marathons. I found out later during the process that actually I needed to bump it up for my training, but I started out with 6 miles as my median run. The intention was to also incorporate a lot of strength training into this training schedule, but with the time that running consumed and certain things not going as planned and busy seasons with work and trying to handle YouTube and all of these things, I did not get as much strength training in as I would have liked. And the days that I did strength train, I kind of prioritized my upper body just because I wasn't getting a lot of upper body exercise with running. And I did try to incorporate a little bit more of it in the end of my training, but in future marathon trainings, I think I've realized just how important training your lower body is in addition to the actual runs. That was basically my training plan. I was training for the Marine Corps Marathon, which I was supposed to run in 2020, but it got deferred twice because of COVID, which I honestly was grateful for. I was not actually in the mood to run a marathon in 2020, and it got deferred to this year, and I finally decided I could have deferred it one more year, but this year I was like, no, I feel it. This is the year that I'm gonna run the marathon. So that was October 30th, 2022, and I started my training June 6th of this year to allow for 24 weeks of training and some tapering towards the end of my training. June 6th was, I would still say that was probably a really good start for me, but I will start different when training for my next marathon, but I'll go into that now as well. So like I mentioned, I did a half marathon in April of this year and I got a PR. I had built my base up and was training really well, running that distance at a good speed. I ran it in 1:45:02, so that was a 8-minute 2-second pace, and I wanted to keep that going and get that same pace for my marathon. After my half marathon, I was kind of exhausted because up until that point, the half marathon is the longest distance I've ever ran, and I wanted to take a little break from running before jumping back in and kind of building up my base again for the marathon. So for the rest of April and May, I still ran, but I only ran enough to just keep up my basic level of what I consider my ability to run. So I was running 4 miles twice a week and 6 miles once a week. Late May, I saw a post, and everything you read about running should be taken with a grain of salt because everybody's body is so different and handles running so different. I saw a post at the end of May saying that when you start marathon training, your body should be able to run a base. And when I say base, I mean it is the basic level. Like I have ran up to that point and can comfortably run up to that point. I'm trained up to this point. I saw a post saying that your base should be 13.1 miles going into the start of marathon training. So I freaked out because I had taken 2 months off, well, a month and a half off of my training, and did not feel like my base was probably up to that anymore because you lose that kind of quick. I was like, wow, I gotta jump into this training and really just get busy, get my mileage up really quickly. Big mistake. I was like, okay, gotta run this much, get my mileage from 8, which I consider, like, if I'm not fully trained, I think 8 is a good base for me personally. So I was like, I gotta get it from 8 to 13 really, really quick. So going into the first week of June, my training plan was very crunched. So the first month of my training, June 6th to July 6th, I was cranking out the mile. Well, the plan was to crank out the miles. I was running the far distances really early. My body may not have necessarily been ready to jump in that quick, but I was doing it. I felt good. My knees started hurting a little bit, and that should have been a flag to me, but it wasn't. I was like, whatever, I've pushed through. My knees have never been injured before. I don't know what that feels like. And I kept running those long distances and just checking the runs off anyway. This was the only time during my marathon training where I actually really felt ahead and good and ready for the marathon, which is like the beginning. That's not good. I was comparing with a few people who I knew were running marathons similar to mine. So I have friends in the area who are running, basically everyone was running the Chicago Marathon, which was 3 weeks ahead of mine. So I was keeping my training plan compared to theirs, and everyone was like, oh, you're running 11 miles already. That's great. And I was confused because I was like, shouldn't you be running 11 miles already? Like, we're supposed to be way past this now. But I was like, okay, great. I feel ahead and prepared. So I continued checking these runs off until the injury. The injury changed the trajectory of essentially everything. I had a really bad fall in the middle of the city about 2 weeks into my training. So 2 weeks I've been checking off these distance runs and just cranking it out with my knee feeling a little wonky. And that night I hit the pavement directly on my knee. And it hurt pretty bad, but I shook it off. I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I've hurt my knee before. This is just gonna be a little bruise. I had a 10K to race for the New York Roadrunners that weekend, and that was gonna be my median run for the week. I was like, okay, like, if I can run 4 miles tomorrow, the 10K is not gonna be a problem for me. I ran on Friday my regular 4-mile easy run, and it hurt, but it wasn't that bad. So I was like, okay, so it's just a little bruise. It's just gonna be a little painful. It's fine. Come the next morning for the 10K, it hurts. Running, I think that Friday made it even worse. It hurt so bad. I was nervous, but I was like, okay, I ran 4 miles yesterday. Surely the 10K today won't be that crazy. I get out there, I start running the 10K. The first mile is like, not great, but kept going anyway. And I also had really wanted to PR this 10K. I was like, all of the races I did with New York Roadrunners this year really pushed me to try to PR each one. So this was kind of a big deal to me at the time. Mile 2, it felt like my knee was grinding against the bone underneath. So I just kind of stopped and realized, like, okay, this is not good. I tried to like start running again, and every time I tried to start running again, it was excruciating, truly, truly excruciating pain. After a lot of frustration and crying and trying to find someone on the sidelines of New York Roadrunners to like get me ice or help me figure out what was wrong or figure out how to get to the finish line, several times debated just quitting the race, but honestly, it was in Queens and I had nowhere to go. So I couldn't quit the race. I had to walk on this excruciating pain to the finish line. That whole time I was really upset because I was like, why is this happening? How much is this gonna set back my training? And I was just thinking of all the things that could possibly be wrong. It was when I really accepted that it was a actual bad injury that I probably would need to rest for a little bit. Wound up crossing the finish line. I rested for the next 3-4 days because most things, like most minor injuries, you can kind of bounce back in 3 to 4 days of rest. Not this one. For, I would say like 2 weeks, every several days I tried to get out, run on my knee again, just like trying to get to just 4 miles. And each time I would get 0.25 miles in and feel the excruciating pain, and it didn't really seem to be getting better at all. So I was getting really worried, got an MRI, made sure that my meniscus wasn't torn, and I got it checked out by a doctor, and it just turned out to be like I hit my cartilage weird and I kind of deteriorated some cartilage in my knee, which meant there wasn't really a solution. I just had to wait and see. 3 weeks after the 10K, I tried a knee brace. I went out for a run and I was able to handle 4 miles without pain. So July 6th, I officially started running again. And I tried to ease back into the training. Like I didn't consider myself in the training until I had gotten 2 4 miles and a 6-mile run in, which again is what I do during my off season. Once I was able to successfully do that first week, that July 6th week, I considered myself back in the running and I adjusted my training plan. Phase 3 of my training, I call the comeback. I would say this phase lasted from July 7th to August 20th. Along the way of my marathon training, I had a few races set up with New York Roadrunners that I wanted to use as checkpoints within my training. They have a 12-miler and an 18-miler are meant to be checkpoints along the way for the New York Marathon. So in my head, the New York Marathon was a week later than the Marine Corps Marathon that I ran. And in my head, I was like, okay, so my base needs to be a little bit higher than these checkpoints because they are a week behind me. So my goal for August 20th, which was the 12-miler, was to have ran 14 miles before that race. And at this point, it was getting later in the training. I was kind of, after my injury, set on to what my schedule should have been from the beginning. And 14 miles before the 12-mile race was a pretty realistic goal. Bouncing back into it, the short runs were a piece of cake. They were becoming no problem. I was getting really fast with the speed training. I was doing really, really great on the shorter runs. The long distance runs went well in the beginning of this when I was getting back up to like 8-9 miles, but towards 10 to 12, I started to run into some problems. It was the middle of July, first of all. It was hotter than I'm used to running in. Every half marathon I've trained for previously has been in the spring. Typically running in these long distances before, up until the 12-mile mark, I don't have a problem kind of running without water. Especially in winter, it's just like, okay, I drink water when I'm done. In July, that wasn't really an option. So I tried to find different things that could help me with getting some water along the way. My mom wanted me to get a camelback, which is like you wear one of those backpacks with water and you have a straw that you like drink from sporadically, but I was like, I don't know if I necessarily need that just yet. I tried carrying regular water bottle, it didn't really do well, and then got this bad boy. So I used it for the first time and I used it wrong. I held it like this when I ran, which kind of made me, especially for such a long distance, clench my fist around it really hard. You're supposed to kind of run with loose hands a little bit, or at least I do, so the blood can flow better, and I was clenching my hand like this the whole time. And I was like, this hurts, and it was like hard to hold up. And then it dawned on me the next time, like, oh. Freedom, you have more freedom with your hands. So I wore it like this and then it was fine. It did take me a little bit to get used to the weight of the water, but it wound up not being so bad. Next problem, once I started getting toward like 10, 12 miles, I was just drinking the water. I have a problem with restricting my water consumption. So I would drink a few sips and be like, okay, this will hold me over a little bit. It's the middle of July. It wasn't enough. I was like, at some points I was stopping. I was like, gotta drink it all, gotta finish this water, and then I wouldn't have anything. And I like tried that a few times, and then I just was so full before I like even made it to mile 10 or mile 12. My initial thought was like, okay, I'll finish this and I'll like be pre-hydrated, which by the way, I did try to also pre-hydrate. So like the night before I was drinking a lot of water, wake up, drink a little bit of water before I head out. Drinking so much at the intermittent spots with the water bottle, not good. By the time the 12 miler came around, it's like, okay, like I'll just be set back in my plan a little bit. I'll catch up, it's okay, no biggie. I'll just use the 12 miler as my 12 mile run, it's fine. I do the 12 miler with New York road runners because there are cups of water along the way. I was like drinking up the water. It's the middle of August at this point. I still haven't fixed my ability to space out water. It was also a particularly hot day and I stupidly wore like sleeves. Like not long sleeves, but I wore short sleeves when I'm used to running in hot weather in like just the sports bra, and I wore short sleeves. I'm like chugging down water at each stop, trying not to, but like can't really resist once I get that first taste of pure bliss. And I was really full. Like I needed to stop somewhere and pee. There wasn't really anywhere to pee. I didn't want to stop and pee. Like it's the middle of a race. I don't want to stop and pee, especially for 12 miles. Like I can finish that in theory in like just a little over an hour and a half. So I was like, I can't stop for water. And it hurt. Like I felt all the water sloshing around. It wasn't good. I was hot. And I honestly was concerned I was going to pass out, and I stopped to walk. Now, anytime I stop to walk in a race, my motivation to restart the run, not good. Like if I stop to walk in a race, I very likely won't be running consistently again. So I stopped to walk around like mile 6, and I had to then struggle for the last 6 miles of the 12 miler, walking, intermittently running. Meanwhile, my stomach is just so full of water and I'm extremely hot, worried I'm gonna pass out. And that was not a successful 12-mile run. At this point, I'm 2 months and like a week out from my marathon, and I'm starting to get nervous. I'm comparing my runs now to everyone else, and I started to feel really inadequate in my training, blaming my knee a little bit for setting me back because I didn't have time to trial and error a few things with water sooner. And it just was not looking like a recipe for success. All of my friends doing the Chicago Marathon were starting to get really, really ahead of me. I was still trying to keep my calm by being like, okay, well, their marathon is 3 weeks before mine. It's fine. I still have those 3 weeks ahead of where they are. I decided to keep pushing. It was only gonna get a little bit cooler, so those problems were going to go away. During that period, I realized that I had, in a way, made myself more of a sprinter because I was killing the 4-mile runs, 5-mile runs. Speed was insane, and I realized that I had stopped making myself a distant runner. The following week, I had one more race with the New York Road Runners, which was just a 5-miler, and I gave my absolute all to that, blasted through, wound up getting a 7:29 pace. I threw up, but I got a 7:29 pace. It would have been faster if I hadn't thrown up before the finish line, if I would have waited until after the finish line, but it's okay. I realized like, hey, marathon's coming, gotta focus more on distance again. I had to retrain to become more of a distance runner, kind of take a step back and pace myself on my longer runs rather than trying to take off too fast and trying to like get it done at a good speed. That was a major problem with some of the 10 to 12 mile runs I was doing at first too. Like that was part of the reason I needed to chug water, is because I was just like exhausting myself too quickly. I then increased my median run from 6 to 8 miles, because it's like those extra 2 miles, if that's my median, 12 miles would in theory be not much more. So I did increase my median run, and that was how I focused a little bit more on distance and just slowing down my pace for the longer runs. Going into stage 4, I call this my getting better phase. I had these 8 mile median runs that were making the distance easier. I was starting to get better at the actual distance and pacing it better and just getting to those higher miles. Conquering 14, I kind of ran into another problem with water consumption, because after mile 12, I started taking energy chews. And these energy chews I was taking dried my mouth so bad. It really made me even more dehydrated as I was taking them. And I would take them like every other mile, and then I would drink water, like allow myself a few sips of water every other mile. It was working for like 14 to 16 miles because I had learned to pace my water consumption a little bit more, and it was okay for miles 14, 15. Race day, like how am I going to refrain from drinking so much water and going through that 12-mile race again mentally if I'm having these energy chews up until mile 26 and they're drying my mouth out and I need water so desperately? I started finding some better fuel sources. I did a little bit of research at this point, and I realized that I shouldn't be having those carbs every couple of miles if you're going to do that and have the energy gels. For my body, it wasn't really working. It's better to fuel before, at least for me. Again, this is for me. And then if I'm gonna have the energy chews, to only have them once, like have more of them at once during the run. And that helped with the dry mouth problem. I was only having bananas before my long runs previously. I started having peanut butter with those bananas to slow down the absorption of the carbs, and that actually worked wonders. I had more energy for longer. I wasn't burning out, and it really did last longer. And honestly, for a lot of the runs, I didn't feel like I needed the energy chews, but I did them anyway. So I did them up to like mile 16. And I also started making a beet juice, which I'll share the recipe maybe in another video. I might do a video specifically dedicated to like how I feel like this beet juice helped my running. But there are a lot of nitrates in beets that really kind of push you to go longer and harder, and it helps with your recovery too. And I think just all of the things that I was putting in the beet juice also added extra hydration. So I started drinking like half a cup of beet juice before my runs, in addition to the bananas and peanut butter. And that, I think, that combination really worked with me for these longer distances. 14, 16, and 18 during this phase were still kind of a struggle for me, but I was able to get through them. And I got to my points, I called them no walk points, because like I said, once I walk, it's like, will I run again? I don't know. During this phase, I decided, okay, it doesn't matter. I have to get to this mileage mark. I don't have room to mess up. I had kind of accepted that I may only be getting to, I wanted to initially do 22 as my longest distance a few weeks before the race. I accepted that I was probably only going to get to 20 miles before I had to taper off before the race. For 14 miles, my no walk point was 12 miles, and then I could do whatever I had to do to struggle through the last 2 miles. And then I had a no walk point for 16, which was 14. I could do whatever I had to do to struggle through those last 2 miles to get to 16, and the same for 18. So I made it through those. They weren't easy, but I was doing them. I was getting to those mile marks. And if I can make it to 20 and get to 18 as my no walk point, then some people only do 18 as their highest distance before the marathon. The goal for your longest distance is to teach your body how to run on tired legs. So you don't necessarily have to run the full distance of a marathon. In fact, you shouldn't, because that's a lot of stress on your body and it risks you getting injured for race day. As long as you can hit 18 to 22, that's what most people aim for as their longest distance run before the race. That should be about 3 weeks before, so that you can taper over those last 3 weeks. And I started during this phase also like every third week, like had a lower mileage week, which helps a lot with recovery too. And I'll do this better. This is a big learning for me. I'm going to do this better during my next marathon, is like 14, 15, 16, 12. for the long distance, and then like maybe during that lower mileage week cutting 8 back to 6 and like that kind of thing. I incorporated that lower mileage 3rd week and it really helped a lot. That was how I made it. I struggled, but I made it up to that 18 point. The last week of this phase of the training, I had another New York Roadrunners race, which was the Bronx 10 miler. I decided to use that as my replacement for my median run. I was like, okay, it's 2 more miles. It's the Bronx 10 miler. I came off of that race so excited. I did so well, and I ran the whole 10 miles. It was my first distance race back after that 12-mile fiasco, and I ran the whole 10 miles through, pacing myself and trying to take it slow and listen to my body. I got a 7:53. So I was extremely happy with that because I felt at the time like I could have kept it up for another 3 miles, which would have been a half marathon, which would have been a better half marathon pace than my half marathon that I ran and PR'd at in April. So I was like, yes, I'm doing good. I'm finally like really getting back into it and absolutely killing it. So I came off of the Bronx 10 miler really high, really ready to conquer my 20-mile run and just check it off the list. And then I had the 18-mile race with New York Roadrunners. So I was like, yes, I can do this. Just 2 more long runs and I'm done until race day. The week of the Bronx 10 miler, I had 1 day to get this 20-mile run in before my 18-mile race the following Sunday. So that would be only like 4 recovery days after running my long run to like get back out there and kind of do the same distance over again almost. 2 days after the 10-mile race, I was like, that's a lot. My body is feeling very tired. I actually listened to my body and I'm still happy. I don't regret listening to my body on this one. Didn't do it, and at that point I couldn't do it any later because it would be too close to the 18-miler. So I was like, okay, it's fine. I can taper 1 week later. I can run this 18-miler and then I can run 20 the next week and then I can taper after that. It's okay if I push my taper because it's what's going to work best for my training plan and the obstacles I've faced so far. The following week, it's time for the New York Roadrunners 18-miler. I'm feeling kind of confident about it, ready to go. The hurricane that hit Florida swept up. We were rained out. It was like really, really windy conditions and they canceled the race. So I was like, okay, I'll run 18 at some point on my own this week. I waited out Monday, still not good weather. Tuesday, still not good weather. Wednesday came around, the weather still wasn't great, and I just kind of accepted at that point, as long as I can run 18, no stop, I'll be okay. Because I wanted to taper in time and not run my last long distance too soon before my marathon, after Wednesday, we're finally getting some good weather. I'm realizing I have to crunch my 8-miler and my 18-miler together now in order to get this finished before Sunday so I can taper. I ran the 8 great, no problem. Next day, 18-miler comes along and I try to go out and run the 18 miles the day after I ran 8 because at this point I had no choice. I got to about mile 14, I think, before my knee, it was in extreme pain again. And I was worried it was my injury flaring up. So I stopped. I rested it for that weekend. I babied it and I decided that the following week I could try to run the 18 miles again. I'll just taper for 2 weeks now. I tried to run my easy runs and my median runs. Median runs were kind of hard on my knee and the easy runs were okay at first, but they started becoming more of a struggle as well. At this point, cannot run another distance run before my marathon. At this point, I wasn't even sure if I could run my marathon because my knee was in so much extreme pain and it wasn't getting better. Even the easy runs a few days later started being extremely painful. That second week before the race, I didn't run at all. I worried a lot. Will I be able to run the marathon? Will it be okay? Am I going to start this marathon and then get pain part of the way through? And then I realized that the pain was kind of different. After a little bit of research, feeling, and like really trying to be in tune with my body and exactly where and how it hurt as I ran with each stride, I realized that it was IT band syndrome. I looked up some exercises, I started strength training it, tried to not run still that second week before the race, just was focused on strength training this IT band. I was like, this is all I've got. Like, this is what's going to carry me through the finish on race day. I knew that IT band syndrome wasn't so serious that I couldn't run the race. Like, it's not like I'm about to tear my meniscus. I'm going to try to do this. It's gonna be really painful. I might struggle a lot, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to push. I continued to baby it, ice it, took anti-swelling medicine, and then we have race week. I had to decide between resting before the marathon or doing a little bit of warming up since I didn't run at all the week prior. I decided to take it really easy, do 2 4-mile runs that week before the race, just 2, and then do a 2-mile shakeout. The shakeout run is running the day before the race. It's typically like under 20 minutes. It's low effort. You're not even supposed to really feel any sort of exhaustion or effort or strain in any way for the shakeout run. It's just literally to shake out your legs and your nerves and everything. For the 4-mile runs, I was feeling a little bit of pain. I was pretty nervous, to be quite honest. I was like, if I'm feeling a little bit of pain for 4 miles, don't know what it's gonna be for the race, but I was able to run, which is better than I could say for the weeks before. I will take it, and hopefully the adrenaline on race day can just push me through. I felt really anxious. I really wasn't even sure if I was gonna cross the finish line. I tried, like the whole week I was trying to get into a fighting mindset. I was like, I'm going to push, I'm trying, but I didn't really believe it, but I was like, it's fine, it's gonna be fine. The shakeout run also hurt my knee, but I did it. And I'll tell you guys about how the actual race went in the next video, but I wanted to give you some learnings from what I took from all these ups and downs and this journey that I went on for my training. Number 1, somewhere along the way, I realized that I had to stop comparing my training to everyone else. I never really was. I wasn't intentionally trying to, but I was. Like, I'd hear what other people were doing, and it either was a boost of confidence, which it shouldn't be because my body's my body, or really, really discouraging. I realized that like I really shouldn't compare my runs so much to other people's runs. I also learned that I shouldn't be trying to push out too hard too quick. I had a goal to make this race at a Boston Marathon pace. I was gonna qualify for Boston Marathon with it, and by the end I was just grateful to be able to do it if I could. I think not expecting too much out of yourself too quickly was a pretty big takeaway for me. I am trying, now that I've done this, I'm trying to qualify for Boston for a race that I'm doing in April 2023. It's the Jersey City Marathon. It's a pretty flat course. Yeah, I am trying to qualify for Boston with this one, but I ran this marathon injured and with not great training out of 4:15, which is honestly better than I thought I could do, all things considered, and I'll tell you more about the race in the next video. But I think it is actually, now that I've taken these learnings, a realistic goal, and I'm going to do it slower, do my training slower, and incorporate everything that I got from this into my next race training. I also learned that I'm a lot tougher than I thought, because there were so many times I wanted to quit, so many times I wanted to be done, and so many times I just didn't think I'd make it to the next point, especially after that first injury, and then how the 12-miler was a complete disaster. I really did not think that I could bounce back those times, and I did. Marathon training really, it's a mental battle. A lot of it is so mental, and it really challenges you to keep going, and it helps you be more perseverant. I also learned to just like have more fun with it. I wasn't having enough fun with it. Running is my favorite thing to do. I saw a quote that's like, long distance runs are just doing what you love for longer. I needed to kind of bask in that a little bit more, enjoy it, enjoy the scenery around me, stop focusing so much on the time or the distance or being able to do it. And I think that's something that I definitely will be able to do better in my next marathon training. I have, and I think I'm going to try to do this for each marathon. Obviously, I don't know. Oh, actually the biggest thing that I learned was that you don't know what you don't know. So going into this marathon, I would have thought I'm going to train this way, I'm going to conquer each problem I have by doing these things. And you know what? I just didn't know a lot of things about running. I didn't know some of the things that I'm going to tell you in this takeaway section next. So I think that I'm going to try to take 3 learnings from each marathon moving forward. But again, I don't know what I don't know. So maybe it will be more than 3. Maybe it will be less. Maybe I'll be perfect and won't need to. That's obviously not gonna happen. But I'm going to try to take 3 learnings and apply them toward my next race training. I have 3 major improvements that I'm going to make for the upcoming spring marathon. My IT band, by the way, still working on the recovery. I guess this is actually 4. I have 3, but like a 4th is just like taking it slower in my training and not cranking out the miles so early or doing more than my body can handle. I'm gonna be doing that while I'm like resting and trying to improve my IT band. I'm taking November, December off from like full-on training. I'm trying to get back to my 3-a-week schedule, but it's honestly been like such a struggle with my IT band, so I'm taking advantage of like the time off from running, and I did a CKO kickboxing class this morning and I really enjoyed that. I might do F45 for like 3 weeks before we move, and then in January when we move to Miami, I think I'm gonna try to bounce back into the marathon training then. I'll try to get back to my 4-4-6 regular base before that. For now, I'm taking it easy. Then when I do build back into the marathon training, I'm going to take it a lot slower and not try to pack on the miles quite as fast. Will not be risking injury quite so much. And in addition to that, takeaway number 2, I guess I have 4, sorry, 4. Takeaway number 2 is going to be incorporating more strength training. So I'm doing a lot of IT band exercises. I'm doing them like 2 to 3 times a week right now. After I heal my IT band and I don't feel that pain there anymore, I'm going to try to upkeep that once a week. And I say just once because I'm going to be doing a variety of other lower body encompassing exercises. So I'll be doing, I don't know, I'll show you sometime. A lot of one-legged work, a lot of explosive lower body work. And I'm just gonna focus a lot on strength training in addition to my runs, like maybe even prioritize it over some of the runs for my next training schedule. I think that will help a lot with preventing injury, both in my knee, the whole IT band, shin splints, because I've had a problem with that historically. I just didn't for this marathon. Number 3, I'm gonna be getting more sleep because I think that's also really important in recovery. I did not get to prioritize sleep a lot this season of my life. But moving to Miami, I think things might be a little bit more laid back than they are in this busy New York area. Maui's also getting a little bit older and calmer. And I'm gonna start taking him on some of my runs with me, so he won't require like extra exercise as much after that. And so I'll be able to, I think personally, over the next few months, I might be able to slow down a little bit and invest in more sleep. Try to get closer to 7 to 8 hours every night because I don't do that. It's like a big no-no. Hopefully that extra well, I say extra, but like the basic need of rest will be fulfilled and I'll like recover a little bit better and just be able to run stronger and better from more sleep. And number 4, so I didn't talk much about this previously, but towards the end of my training, I learned about these things called junk miles. I don't quite buy into the whole, some trainers do, some trainers don't. I don't quite buy into the whole idea that certain miles you run. The idea of junk miles is that, say you run 10 miles on a median day instead of 8 miles. Are those extra 2 miles really benefiting you in your training somehow and your body's needs? Probably not. I mean, it depends on what your needs are. Like I said, when I bumped my median distance from 6 to 8, that made an impact. That did help me. Now, if I had bumped that from 6 to 10, it might not really have done more good than harm. The junk miles essentially are extra miles that do more wear and tear on your body than benefit your race. And I don't buy into the idea completely because I'm like, okay, say I want to run 10 miles for fun, or that week I did the Bronx 10 miler and counted it as my median. Like, that benefited me in some way, enjoyment, whatever, motivation, whatever it may be, that still benefited me mentally. The takeaway that I'm taking from junk miles not run efficiently. So a lot of the runs that I was doing, especially on the 4 and the median runs, I was kind of running at a pace that wasn't pushing myself. It also wasn't really easy. It wasn't like a recovery run. And I kind of learned the importance of doing 80% of these recovery runs at a very slow speed. And by very slow, I mean like, I would say my average pace / my pace that I was running for these like things that I wasn't quite pushing, but I wasn't running slow. It's like a 7:50 to 8. And so I needed to be running at like an 8:30 to 9 for actual recovery. And to me, like I wasn't running at that pace because I was like 8:30 to 9. Like I wasn't doing that. And I also wasn't always pushing as hard. I was doing my interval training that I mentioned, but that was like 1 day a week and only for 3 miles. I still don't think I was like pushing enough on some push days either. Ideally, the idea is to rest / recover 80% of your miles. So that would be like a slower pace that like feels almost too slow for you. And then really, that allows you to really push hard on that other 20%. I wasn't doing that. I was kind of taking everything moderately active. And I think that to me, those junk miles are miles that are not either recovery or speed. So I think I'm going to try to incorporate that mindset a little bit more. I'm going to try to run at a speed that feels really, really slow to me. And maybe I'll have gotten faster to the point where 7:50 does feel slower to me. I can only hope. but I'm going to try to be more efficient with that in my next training plan. So I will let you guys know how that goes. I might track it better along the way rather than this one all-encompassing video in the end. Those are some things I learned. Those are some bumps I had, and that is my journey to my first marathon. I will make a follow-up video sometime over the next week detailing how the actual marathon went and what it's like to run your first marathon. I learned a lot, and I'm sure if you do it, there will be a lot of different takeaways you have. The whole thing is a learning process, so it's important that you keep that in mind whether you're training for a half marathon or a marathon, and you're just going to learn more and more each time. I'm sure I'm not done learning. I'm sure I'll have new challenges, but I think that I'm ready to face them a little bit better in this next marathon training, and I think that I have conquered, at least somewhat, the obstacles that I faced during this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was beneficial to you in some way, and I hope this motivates you to get out there and start your running journey. See you next time.